Thank you so much, Rose and Justin. What a fun interview. I'm excited to hear players' answers on what their favorite Paradox Pokemon are throughout the day. I think we already have a match. And it is a banger.
It's going to be so
banger.
great.
I'm actually so excited for this one. This is one that we were looking at the teams before we started today, and we said, if that team is undefeated, we want them on stream. And so Jake and I, let us introduce who is going to be our other round 4 match.
Our round 4 match.
A little bit of options here. Once again, into our third try is the Charm here. Arcanine, Iron Hands, and Cerulege Jumpluff. Looks like we are getting into turn 1. That Intimidate already showing off that clear amulet. Going into the Fluttermane as well, into the Jumpluff, not too worried.
No, I mean, immediately clear amulet paying off dividends here because you're not at -1 attack. You can freely bulk up to +1 if you want to. And like we were saying earlier, this Cerulege really does not worry about Arcanine or Iron Hands at all. The best damage option on the team, on the field for John, is a Wild Charge into that Cerulege, but if you Terra Steel, you don't have to Terra Steel, but if you bulk up, you're going to be able to shrug off that Wild Charge and just heal right back up with Bitter Blade later on.
Yeah, and I think Cerulege, right? It's a pretty speedy Pokemon if it wants to be sometimes. I think, you know, you're probably, when you run something like Bulk Up, you want to get your Bulk Up off fast. Because if you can get a Bulk Up off before you take damage, then it's even better. Sleep Powder moves first, though, into the Iron Hands. Iron Hands did not go for something like a Fake Out this turn. Is going to start taking some sleep turns. Flare Blitz from the Arcanine into the Jumpluff. No Terrestrialization, so you do get knocked out this turn. But I think that's a pretty huge sleep to get off right on turn 1. Cerulege, no hits just yet. This turn is going to be able to make some big moves with this Bulk Up here.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very smart sleep pattern there because you can get faked out thanks to the Covert Cloak. And you know that if the Iron Hands does Terrestrialize into Grass type, you know, you can't sleep pattern it, but Bitter Blade becomes super effective, and so that's a very risky Terrestrialization for Miguel. John capitalizing there well. I really don't think you mind losing the Jumpluff there immediately because you do hit that sleep pattern. It's a very fair trade, and now you have a +1/+1 Cerulege next to a Life Orb Fluttermane into a sleeping Iron Hands and an Arcanine that doesn't have much to do into the Cerulege at all. So I think it's a very strong position for John, even though he is down 3-4 and hasn't done much damage himself.
Yeah, I mean, now you also have the opportunity to just click Snarl in front of this Fluttermane, which it does not love dealing with Snarls. You know, it could go for the Terrestrialization here. It is Terra Fairy, which would be pretty nice. You still get the extra damage boost to something like your Dazzling Gleam, which isn't going to do that much damage onto Arcanine, but would still be pretty helpful. And then you can also at least then, even if you're taking that drop, you're getting the, you know, you're handling it a little bit better without taking that damage. But Protect is going to be the move this turn from that Fluttermane. Instead, no Terrestrialization to speak of. Flare Blitz from the Arcanine goes into the one Pokemon that would have been able to take a Flare Blitz on the opposite side of the field, being the Fluttermane, but no chance with that Protect. Another Bulk Up here, pretty free to go for it in the face of this sleeping Iron Hands. Iron Hands, though, is going to have the opportunity to wake up, and it does this turn. So Iron Hands going for a Wild Charge, just going for some damage, but those Bulk Ups really paying off here.
Yeah, that is very easily healed up by a single Bitter Blade into the Iron Hand slot. It's a smart Protect from Fluttermane. You know, just make sure that you don't lose it this turn. Flare Blitz would have done a big amount of damage. Possibly hoping the Arcanine may have gone for something like a Snarl just to, you know, avoid damage altogether. But the Fluttermane's still in a very strong spot here. It does have that Life Orb. It throws a lot of damage into Iron Hands and Arcanine with either Moonblast or Shadow Ball. Life Orb, Shadow Ball, maybe very, very close to knocking down that Arcanine with that chip damage. I can't say with certainty that it would get that knockout, but a combination of something like a Shadow Sneak and a Shadow Ball certainly would. Or we could start targeting down that Iron Hands as well. A lot of options here for John with this boosted Cerulege.
Yeah, I think Cerulege is now in a pretty good spot. You may not have gotten all the sleep turns you wanted, but you still have the opportunity to get damage off. Arcanine's protecting this turn, though, going to try and stay as safe as possible. Dazzling Gleam from the Fluttermane won't go through that Protect, but it will do super effective damage onto this Iron Hands, who has not Terrestrialized either. Not enough to get a knockout here. Is a critical hit, though. I was going to say that was a good amount of damage. Loses some of that HP because of the Life Orb, but Bitter Blade, you're going to help heal yourself up here and get that knockout onto the Iron Hands, being +2 in attack. Nothing to scoff at whatsoever, and almost back up to full.
Just straight up ignoring that Arcanine, I think it makes sense because again, these Arcanine really can't touch the Cerulege at all. If you're playing to an end game where you win with Cerulege, your goal here is to knock out things that can possibly damage Cerulege or possibly, you know, make Cerulege not be the reason you win the game. And Arcanine is not that case. Golden Goat coming in here, it is threatening to both of these Pokemon. You can take a Shadow Ball with the Cerulege, make a Rain from Fluttermane, will both do massive damage. But now that the Iron Hands is gone, we do have that very easy Terra Steel option from Cerulege. Again, there's really nothing that can damage it with that Terra Steel. Shadow Ball does neutral damage, Making Rain is resisted. Flare Blitz, appears to be super effective, but is blocked by that flash fire. So it's a very, very strong defensive option for John here.
Yeah, it looks like John is going for that right at this point. It's Cerulege. You just had to get rid of that Iron Hands.
Yep.
Iron Hands getting knocked out frees up this game for this Pokemon to really start being a problem for Miguel on his side. You are going to be taking a Protect as well for the Flutter Mane, not trying to take any damage from something like a Make It Rain. Gholdengo protecting as well this turn. Once again, no damage at this point. Arcanine, the last Pokemon to move here. Flare Blitz into the Flutter Mane, not going to happen because of that Protect. So you do make off, I think, pretty well if you're that Cerulege, though. Bitter Blade gets that damage into the Arcanine.
Oh, wow.
Not very effective, still does so much damage, and you're healed back up to full. This Arcanine probably going to get knocked out from a Dazzling Gleam next turn.
Dazzling Gleam certainly should knock it out from here, and if you combine that with a Shadow Sneak into the Gholdengo, that should be 2 knockouts without Miguel's Pokemon moving at all, which is huge. This +2 Shadow Sneak should deal a lot of damage to Gholdengo, and you can even opt for a Bitter Blade just to make sure you get that KO, heal up any possible damage. But this is such a commanding position for John here, because that one thing that was making sure the Flutter Mane couldn't just fire off attacks freely was that Arcanine, but now it is in range for any of Flutter Mane's attacks, so it has the options to just fire off very strong attacks here.
Dragonite switching in here, trying to not take something like that Shadow Sneak, like you said, but into that Dragonite does handle that pretty comfortably, but it breaks the multi-scale, most importantly. Shadow Ball as well from this Flutter Mane into the Dragonite. Does a critical hit as well, is going to take a little bit of knockback there from that Life Orb. Flare Blitz finally connecting into this Flutter Mane. It has wanted to multiple times this game. Flutter Mane will get knocked out, but you're going to take a lot of recoil damage here if you're the Arcanine, and you are going to knock yourself out. So, you have the opportunity still to Terrasilize if you're Miguel. Do you go for your own Terra Steel to stop that damage from from the Shadow Sneak?
Yeah, you certainly could. The Shadow Sneak would do much less damage if you do Terrasilize like Gholdengo. However, Charcoal coming in means Bitter Blade does even more damage now, and it's a pretty tough spot to be in here. The Dragonite taking a bunch of damage, that multi-scale being broken by Shadow Sneak, like you said, it allowed it to even survive that Shadow Ball at the critical hit. That still does a lot of damage. It's not even Assault Vest, that's just a very bulky Dragonite. Unfortunately, still just not a lot of damage options into this Cerulege. If you look at the Dragonite, it does have Extreme Speed, Terra Blast, Ice Spin, or Protect, like we said, and none of those do even neutral damage into a Steel-type Cerulege. Gholdengo, Make It Rain, Power Gem, 5 of the possible 6 attacks Miguel can use that do damage are not very effective into the Cerulege, which is a very tough spot to be in.
Yeah, you have to click Power Gem and hope for some critical hits, I think is the move you have to make, because Power Gem's also super effective into the Torkoal, no matter if, not in this game, but no matter if it Terrasilize or not, right? Dragonite's protecting this turn, trying to not take another Shadow Sneak, most likely. Looks like Gholdengo's Shadow Ball will connect this turn onto the Cerulege, thanks to that Terrasilization. Not going to worry too much about it. Bitter Blade into the Gholdengo, super effective damage, brings it down to that Focus Sash that this Gholdengo is holding, is going to heal back up all of that damage that it just took as well. And now you can go for something like an Eruption if you really wanted to with that, or an Overheat if you wanted to with that Torkoal, get some big damage off as well. Overheat, though, looks like it targeted into the Dragonite. Yeah,
the Overheat target there, not a big deal, just because the Shadow Snake now is able to knock out either of these Pokemon. A very smart target for John to go for Bitter Blade into that Gholdengo, because even if the Gholdengo protects and the Dragonite gets an attack off, it doesn't really matter, because you're not going to take too much damage at +2 defense from a resisted move. And you just make sure that the one thing that can damage you is that Gholdengo. And we saw, just based on the damage, even one critical hit Shadow Ball would not have knocked it out. So just making sure that you don't give the Gholdengo options to fire off more than one attack there.
And that is going to wrap up game 1 for John, right? And what incredibly diverse team building we're seeing from both of these trainers. John brought 3 out of the 4 non-conventional, 3 out of the 4 Pokemon, 3 of them were non-conventional picks, right? And I'm including Torkoal as non-conventional because it's Quick Claw Fissure, right? It's not even running Eruption like I misspoke about. There's a lot of, the Cerulege and the Jump Left didn't even do a whole lot. That sleep wasn't even paying off nearly as much, but it doesn't matter because that Cerulege was just such a problem.
The sleep, I mean, even that one turn of sleep that the Iron Hands did take was still big for the Cerulege because it took, the first time it took a Wild Charge, it was at +2 defense, as opposed to +1 had the Sleep Powder missed or it just not gone for Sleep Powder or something like that. So even though the Jump Left got 1 Sleep Powder off, that was a minimum length sleep and then got immediately knocked out, still a big payoff there because you got that jump start on the bulk up with Cerulege, and then from that point, the Ceruledge was just never threatened a single time from Miguel's end. So I think if you're Miguel going to this game too, you might have to switch up the Pokemon you're bringing or like alter your strategy to make sure that you can at least threaten damage onto Ceruledge at all.
Here's my thought, right, is you lead something like the Golden Go and the Iron Hands, so you force that Ceruledge into a weird 50-50 on Terastallization. And that may put you in a way where you're like, all right, well, I can't get close combated unless I Terra Steel, but if I Terra Steel, then I could, then I'm going to get close combated, or if I don't, then I'm going to take a Shadow Ball.
Right, that's a good point. I think if you force the Terastallization out from either the Ceruledge or from something else, your game plan gets a lot simpler because then you don't have to worry about, is it going to turn into a Steel type? Should I close combat this Ghost type and hope it Terastallizes? Like, it becomes a lot more straightforward if you know that it can, or if you know that it already has or cannot Terastallize.
Yeah, I think it does. I think it creates a little bit of an interesting opportunity for you, but then you are still forcing a 50-50, and that never feels great when you're already down a game.
Right.
However, it looks like we already can see what these trainers have brought, at least on Miguel's side. And Miguel is leading a little bit of a different choice this time from game 1. However, John is going to be showing his Pokemon first on stream here. It is going to be the Fluttermane and the Ceruledge, so no Jumpluff this time, but Arcanine Palafin is coming in.
I like the Palafin bring, especially because, like we were just saying, you have to make sure that you have the option to damage Ceruledge. Like, based on what happened in that first game, that was just never really something that John was worried about, with Ceruledge taking a lot of damage on one turn. So right now, the Palafin is now threatening a Wave Crash. It threatens Jet Punches. It obviously can switch back out and come back in Hero form, which might be the first Hero form Palafin we've seen today, given that Leonard's never got to transform.
It transformed once.
Did it?
Yeah,
it
once.
Terastallized. Oh, no, you're right. It did. But a lot more freely able to move around the field here, Palafin is. And I like the Palafin bring, even though it's a little bit rough into something like the Jumpluff. It allows Miguel to threaten the Ceruledge, which is a big step up from game 1.
I think you're happy to not see the Jumpluff here
very.
well if you're Miguel. I think you're very happy to not have that. You're not worrying about speed control. Palafin is just going to hard switch here. It says, I want to be in Hero form as soon as possible. Iron Hands switching in its place. Does get some extra threats of damage, but you are possibly taking some super effective damage on top. Shadow Sneak into the Iron Hands does do a nice little chip, but you're not bulking up. And a Moonblast targeting into there as well. Super effective damage brings it down to its bottom 25% of the health. Special attack drop's not all that important there, but it does look nice to have. Flare Blitz from the Arcanine into the Fluttermane, enough for that knockout, so a way more decisive turn 1 for Miguel.
Very good turn 1 for Miguel. However, if you just think back to game 1, the game plan for John was knock out the Iron Hands, then Terastallize, and then you win. And you're almost to that first step is knock out the Iron Hands. So not hitting the Palafin like you maybe wanted, but this Garchomp coming in, also a very good answer to Iron Hands, and doesn't have to worry about this Iron Hands getting off a Fake Out or a Volt Switch or anything, or Wild Charge. Now the Ceruledge is pretty free to just bulk up again. Like, again, the Arcanine really doesn't have anything to do against it. It can burn the Garchomp, which, great, but you're not really dealing with the Ceruledge that way. And so even though that's not the knockout John maybe wanted, it's so big for his gameplay now because it's much easier for him to Terastallize the Ceruledge.
I think you still probably take a Fake Out onto the Garchomp this turn. It's a Assault Vest, so it's a pretty easy target for that Fake Out, and then maybe go for some damage. Garchomp is just going to switch out here, though. Garchomp is all set and not trying to get faked out, probably just trying to bait it onto another Pokemon in the back, and it's that Torkoal. Torkoal just boosting that Sun Up, helping its partner there. Even though it doesn't have those bulk up attack boosts, it's increasing the power of those fire type attacks. Fake Out into the Torkoal here. Will-O-Wisp from the Arcanine into the Torkoal as well, so a really nice call here, and there is your free bulk up. And here is where things start to get a little dicey.
Yeah, this bulk up, it's the beginning of the end, I think, just because one bulk up is going to be enough for the Ceruledge to take anything from Iron Hands very comfortably. Even when Palafin comes in, the sun is up, and Ceruledge has the option to Terastallize away from that water weakness, and that's going to be huge for the Ceruledge. Even though, I guess we did talk about earlier, the Palafin does have close combat, so it isn't actually as straightforward, because if it does Terastallize into that Steel type, probably not a one-hit knockout at plus defense, but might come very close.
Palafin's a really interesting Pokemon here.
Yeah.
Do you force your knockout into the Iron Hands to then bring in the Palafin? Does that become possibly the game plan here that Miguel is going for? Does that then force John to ignore it and try and do some damage to the Arcanine? do you go for a fissure this turn? There's a
honestly?
there's a lot of options, I think. If you go for a fissure and you target into where the Palafin could switch in and get the fissure off and knock out the Palafin, you are smooth sailing. But looks like Helping Hand is the choice here, though, for that Torkoal. Snarl from the Arcanine is going to lower that special attack of the Torkoal and do a little bit of super effective damage, but truly just not enough damage here. Bitter Blade to the Arcanine, not very effective, but with the Sun Boost and the bulk up, that is enough for the knockout, and that is absolutely huge here for John. And I mean, that Helping Hand really just helping out.
Yeah, I'm sure that's something that John has in his head, is how much Bitter Blade does to Arcanine at various stages of boost. Just because that's such a common matchup you're going to be seeing, and so knowing that that +1 Bitter Blade, say that 5 times fast, should be able to KO the Arcanine from there is nice, because now you don't have to worry about the Garchomp on John's end getting burned, getting intimidated, anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, at this point still, though, you have Pokemon in the back that contradict the opportunities to terrastalize with Cerulege. You've got the Palafin and the Golden Go and Iron Hands. Iron Hands can come back in, and but it's at such low HP that you're probably still feeling good about going for a terrastalization, but the Palafin also then makes that hard.
Yeah.
Because then you're trying to focus on a couple of different things here. The Sun at least stops this Palafin from wanting to go for something like a Jet Punch maybe, or like a Wave Crash if it chooses to do so. But it does make things a little bit more complicated, right? This Golden Go wants this thing to not terrastalize. The Palafin wants it to terrastalize.
Yeah, and it's a very good point. Like, you do make John think about whether he should terrastalize his Cerulege or not. If you want to terrastalize to avoid like Shadow Ball and Wave Crash damage, you risk getting called out by a close combat. The Torkoal here, like, obviously Overheat should do a lot of damage to a Golden Go, possibly take it down to its Focus Sash, but doesn't have a lot to do into this Palafin other than a possible fissure that we might see. But the Cerulege now is no longer in such a commanding spot where it just can choose to ignore one slot like I have been able to do the first game and in this game up until now.
Please give me Quick Claw Fissure. I'm sorry.
Oh gosh,
just
I don't know what would happen. Cerulege, it's a lot tougher spot for Cerulege, even if it is boosted and threatening a lot of damage into either slot.
I mean, you could Haze. Haze goes through Clear Amulet.
Good point. Yep.
Haze does go through Clear Amulet.
It does.
Because it's like a full field effect. So in case, it does give you an opportunity to maybe get rid of some of these bulk ups. Looks as well like there is going to be a terrastalization this turn. It is going to be on the Cerulege, giving it that steel typing. You are making a call out right now that you are not going to take something like a close combat. And whether that is the choice that John is deciding to make, assuming that it is a tougher call, Helping Hand as well is going to see maybe you take the close combat, you still live it with the bulk up and you get the HP back from the Brittle Blade, but close combat into the Torkoal instead does knock down the defense there. The Eject Pack is going to allow this Palafin to switch out because of that item, and that's a really cool technique to have with the close combat as well. I think, it allows for a little bit more movement here. Iron Hands can now come in, can fake out that Cerulege on the next turn, unless it goes for something like a Protect possibly.
That's such a smart close combat, because you do get the extra turn to see whether or not this Cerulege is going to terrastalize. It buys you some time to determine what you're gonna, make your game plan for the rest of this game. And you eat this Bitter Blade with the Iron Hands. It's gonna heal up much less damage or much less HP than it would have if the Palafin was in that slot. So I think that was such a good close combat there to activate that Eject Pack, swap the Palafin out, and just scout out what John wanted to do with that Cerulege on that turn.
There is so much cool synergy on Miguel's team, truly. Yeah. I think it really does show his skills as a team builder just by how much there's so much thought into these little moves on the team as well. He's back in it though. You now have a pretty comfortable close combat, but do you go for it with the opportunity, maybe seeing a Protect and try and bait into the other one and then take that defense drop?
Yeah, it's still rough because of close combat, it doesn't get that same type of attack bonus from the Palafin, and we know that Cerulege is a +1 defense. I wouldn't be surprised if Cerulege was able to survive one close combat, but it looks like the Golden Go is faster than the Cerulege, so if Miguel does opt to close combat and Shadow Ball it, likely would be able to take a knockout here. So John in a much more threatened position than he has been throughout the rest of this match.
Torkoal is switching out though. It's going to be bringing that Garchomp back onto the field here. Garchomp's a really comfortable way to maybe deal with some of these Pokemon. Shadow Sneak moving first into that Palafin does do a nice chunk of damage as well. Close combat targeting into that Cerulege. It's enough for the knockout. Absolutely huge. You take those drops, but I don't think you're too upset if you're Miguel because you have gotten rid of a huge threat on the opposite side of the field. And you know who's coming in as a Pokemon that's weak to half of your moveset.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, that's a great turn there. The close combat just enough to knock it out. Palafin is very, very strong, and I apologize for underestimating it, but the Shadow Ball should have been able to clean it out. A bonus is you get some damage on this Garchomp, which is holding that Assault Vest, so it takes the Shadow Ball pretty comfortably, but this Torkoal not in a great spot either, just because Shadow Ball, Wave Crash, Close Combat, any of those should be able to knock it out. And Garchomp's best damage option is that Earthquake, but Torkoal cannot Terastallize into a Flying type anymore. It does have Protect, luckily, so able to buy itself one turn. And the Palafin being at -1 defense now could pay off well for this Garchomp. But notably for Miguel, the Golden Ghost still does have its Focus Sash intact, so it is guaranteed to be able to survive one attack from either Garchomp or Torkoal and fire off one more move.
Someday this is going to be Quick Claw Fissure time. Someday. I'm rooting for it.
That is a big win con here for
That
John.
is a huge win con, right? I mean, into anything but the Golden Go, because Golden Go won't get knocked out. But you could get a bunch of big damage off if you have the opportunity to go for this Earthquake, Click Protect. Quick Claw this turn! Quick Claw this turn! What is it going to be? Oh my gosh.
We gotta wait.
Oh,
we gotta wait.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Oh my goodness.
I think
Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, you are absolutely, putting me on the edge of my seat. Oh, Terra Water from this Palafin, finally having the opportunity to Terastallize. You're only doing neutral damage into that Garchomp because of that Dragon typing. So you want to do damage. Oh, the Protect. That was the saddest Protect I've ever seen. Jet Punch targets down as well into the Garchomp here. It does not do a ton of damage, even with those boosts. You take a little bit of Rough Skin Chip too, which is always nice to have.
Does this get knocked out?
Earthquake here does, hits into Protect. I don't know if it knocks out. It might be really close, especially that Assault Vest is pretty helpful. Golden Go does not get knocked out here. Palafin does get knocked out, though. A really huge turn from John. Imagine if that was Fissure.
I wanted it to be so bad.
I know. I think we both did. I think it would have just been huge. Make It Rain from the Golden Go
is going to be really close.
Is going to be close on this Garchomp, right? That Steel-type damage is going to do a lot. It's not enough to get the knockout, though. And your Garchomp is faster, so... I think it's pretty comfortable to maybe just go for another Earthquake. You knock out your own Torkoal, but that is a pretty nice win con there.
Yeah.
Unless you Protect and call the Earthquake and try and double Protect.
Yeah, I don't think there's a way that Miguel can win this anymore, just because Garchomp will be faster. None of its moves are going to be like less than 100% accuracy, so you just get knocked out by one Stomping Tantrum here. That survival from Garchomp is pretty big. It took a Shadow Ball, a Make It Rain, and a Terra Water Jet Punch in the sun, granted. But that Assault Vest paying huge dividends here because it was able to stomach those Shadow Balls and then Make It Rain enough to survive that onslaught of attacks. Get off that final Earthquake to knock out the -1 defense Palafin. Who knows if the Rough Skin